Hey guys, today's agenda is to take notes on Mangroves Part 3. And I need to make sure that you went and took attendance first, and then let's just get on to it. Alright? Alright, so you're gonna label your notes nice and ginormous. Mangrove Part 3. And today's notes are all about the different species that we can find in Florida. The word mangrove is derived from a Portuguese word and an English word smushed together. And I mean, I was curious, weren't you? Like, it's a weird word. So there you go. That's where it came from. So what is a mangrove? It is any kind of salt-tolerant tropical tree or shrub. Now, we don't have the shrubs in Florida, but we do have 4 species of trees. There are more than 50 species of mangroves worldwide, just 4 for us in Florida. So, we have the red mangrove, the black mangrove, the white mangrove, and the buttonwood. And the buttonwood isn't considered by all to be a true mangrove, but it is in the same family, so we're going to count it. Now, where each mangrove grows depends on its level of salt tolerance. So, I could imagine, hypothetically, of course, just, if there was a Socrative quiz coming up pretty soon, that you might want to know, hint, hint, wink, wink, star, underline, that where each mangrove grows depends on how much salt it can tolerate. For instance, the red mangrove can tolerate a whole lot of salt, whereas the white and the buttonwood, not a lot. Alright, so let's go. Red mangrove. They are named after these fancy little prop roots that are red. Isn't that amazing? That would be a really easy picture that I could put on a Socrative and say, which type of mangrove tree is this? Not only would you know it's a red mangrove because of the red, but also because it has those prop roots. So they grow all along the edges of the shoreline where the conditions are the harshest because they do have that highest salt tolerance. They have these prop roots that hold them up. Really weird fun fact is the prop roots grow from the top down. It's different than what most people would think. And they're important because they allow the gas exchange. So in here, in this ecosystem, this sand is really dense. It's got a lot of bacteria in it, and that bacteria is breaking down the dead leaves that fall off of the trees, which we'll learn more about later. But they breathe through the bark, so it's kind of amazing. Alright, also, it provides this lovely, lovely nursery for all sorts of organisms. Alright, we can find the red mangroves that are native to Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, but they are also present as an invasive exotic species in Hawaii. In Florida, they typically only grow to about 20 feet high. And of course, they're limited by temperature. They don't like to be cold, much like your teacher. Staying where it's nice and warm. You can see some of these red mangroves right here in Tampa Bay or even in Daytona Beach. Each leaf is a little bit different. Here you've got the red mangrove. It's got the point at the tip. It's nice and shiny dark green on the top. On the underside, when you flip it over, it's a pale green. So that's one of the distinguishing features of things that you can look at when you're looking at the trees to determine, is it a red mangrove or is it a black mangrove or a white mangrove? Now, the trunks and the limbs are covered with a nice gray bark over a dark red wood. Okay, they have little yellow flowers that blossom and are pollinated by the wind. These guys, no birds and bees, just wind. And then it starts to grow this little baby plant right here. We're going to say that's about a teenager ready to drop off and start to live in his own life right there. Okay, those are called propagules, and the red mangroves are cigar-shaped or pencil-shaped. They're about 6 inches. And the fun fact for the mangrove trees, the red mangroves, is that sometimes they're called walking trees because it kind of looks like they're walking on water. And, you know, the nerd in me, when I hear walking tree, this is what I imagine. You know, the Ents from Lord of the Rings. Not so much this, but hey, my imagination's a little different than some other people's. Alright, so again, the red mangrove is really important to the nursery habitat for a lot of these creatures will spawn here but will migrate to the coral reefs. So they're very interconnected. But it also provides a habitat for our mammals and our birds and other reptiles. Also good for buffering waves against coastal erosion, which we'll talk about more in the next section. Alright, the black mangroves. So now these guys don't have those prop roots, but instead they have these pencil-like shoots that come out of the ground that are called pneumatophores. And they use those to breathe. Okay, you can see that these mostly out of the water right now. And it's because it grows at a little bit of a higher elevation. So it's only underwater during high tide. So the bark is dark black or brownish. It's kind of scaly, and so that's how it gets its name for being the black mangrove. And those little pencil-like breathing tubes are called pneumatophores. They can reach heights over 65 feet, but in Florida they're usually limited to around 50 because after a hurricane comes through, they, have to start to repopulate all over again. These leaves are also pointy, a little shiny, but not as shiny as the red mangrove. But what's cool is if you flip it upside down, it's got gray on the underside. And it also has white flowers. So here you can see the flowers, and actually right there you can see the propagule. And you can see that that propagule is quite different than the one for the red mangrove that looked like that big pencil. This one is more like a lima bean. And now we get to the white mangrove. Now, roots are not typically the thing you're going to want to look at to be a distinguishing feature between the red, the black, and the white mangroves because oftentimes they don't have any aerial roots. They don't usually have pneumatophores. But when the conditions are necessary, if it's oxygen depleted or there's sediments that have flooded over it, they will grow these really cool short arching roots called peg roots. Now, if you were to see this picture on a Socrative quiz and I asked you what type of mangrove it is, you would know that it's not a red mangrove because those roots are not red, right? Those are white. And they're tiny. They're little arching little peg roots. Don't get tricked. Don't say I didn't warn you. Okay? Oftentimes it's a really short tree, but it could also be a little shrubbish, but it can grow up to 50 feet. But the bark is like a nice pale white color, so hence the reason white mangrove. And then we have the leaves here. Very easy to tell the difference because these leaves are rounded at the top, right there. Okay, not pointy at all. And they're a little bit lighter in color. And if you look at the base of these leaves, there's these little pores that are called nectaries. Now, currently scientists believe this is how mangroves secrete salt, but there is some serious debate on whether or not there is sugar coming out of those instead. So, maybe one of you will be the person to learn this and figure it out, and then you can come back and tell me. Maybe. It could be sugar. Alright, they've got their little white flowers that bloom from early spring to early summer. Alright, so let's just do a little video clip here real quick on those three types of mangroves.
So we're here today. We're going to discuss the three types of mangroves we can find here in southwest Florida, which are the red mangrove, the black mangrove, and the white mangrove. And I'm actually in between two of the species. The first one we're going to discuss is the red mangrove. And the way you can identify mangroves, there's a couple different ways. So the first one we'll discuss is the leaves. The red mangrove has very shiny, very pointy green leaves, which are green on both sides of the leaf. Okay? Now, if you're looking at the black mangrove, it's still pointy, but it's a little less shiny, and it's got a gray back. Okay, so that's a nice way to see it, and I'll pull off one of each of these leaves, which you're not technically supposed to do. So we can compare, we'll get the third one now. Another way to tell is by the root system. Okay, so here we've got the red mangrove, which has this nice contours. It's called the walking tree, and so it's got roots that seem to come out from the tree outside of the soil and go down. So it looks actually like it's walking out. If you see these walking roots, you know you're looking at a red mangrove. Finally is the propagule, which luckily we've got some great examples here. The propagule is actually a live tree. This is how the tree reproduces. It is a seed-like structure, but instead of being a seed, it's a baby tree. And the red mangrove has these cigar-shaped propagules. So again, to summarize, the red mangrove, pointy, shiny leaves, greens on both sides, has this sort of proper walking root system, and it's got these cigar-shaped propagules. So our third type of mangrove here in southwest Florida is the white mangrove. The easiest way to identify the white mangrove is by the leaves, and it has really rounded leaves, as opposed to the black and the white that are pointy. This one is rounded, and it's shiny on both sides. And I'm going to pull this off so we can take a look at all three leaves. So you can see how the black mangrove, the red mangrove are pointy, and the white is rounded. Also on the white, if you can see it, right down here, there are two little nodules at the base of the leaf. The scientists believe that actually secrete sugar, but that's another good identifier for the white mangrove. So here's actually the front of all three leaves, rounded. It's not really the front. So here's the back of all three leaves, so you can see the difference if they don't blow away on me. The back of all three leaves, again, is an identifier. If you're looking at a gray back, you're looking at the black mangrove. Okay, green back with the pointy leaf, red, rounded is white. The root system of the white mangrove can vary, so it's not really a good identifier for the white mangrove. Okay, so if you want to identify, I mentioned earlier, one way to identify mangroves is through their root systems. This is sort of an interesting example because you have mixed root systems here. But one thing you want to look for with the black mangroves is the pencil-like pneumatophores, okay? So what we're talking about are these guys here. This is the root system of the black mangrove. So if you see this, you're going to know you're around black mangroves. And you'll notice that intermixed in that is some of these prop roots of the red mangroves. Another way to identify mangroves, as I mentioned, is the propagules. Unluckily, right now on these trees, we only have the propagule of the red mangrove. But what you're going to be looking for is the cigar-shaped propagule is the red mangrove. The smallest propagule is a white mangrove. And then the middle size that's shaped somewhat like a teardrop is the black mangrove.
Alright, so let's talk about why she did not go through the buttonwood mangrove. Alright, because it's usually found in the upland transition zone, and it is sensitive to frost, so it is restricted to southern Florida. Okay, but one of the main reasons some people argue about whether or not the buttonwood is a true mangrove is that it doesn't reproduce via propagules. Instead, it has these little seed cases. Alright, and the name of the buttonwood comes from these little seed cases that grow in little clusters and apparently look like buttons to some people. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but okay. Sure. Buttons. Alright, so the buttonwood leaves are leathery, and they're pointy with the smooth tips. They also have the two salt-secreting glands located at the base of each vein on the leaf. So different from the nectaries. because that was just at the base of the leaf. These are at the base of each vein, okay? Their flowers are really greenish in color until the seed is ready to fall off. Of the 4 species, the buttonwood can spend the least amount of time in salt water, but and you could take a buttonwood and plant it on campus and it would grow just fine. Ecologically, the buttonwood is noted for withstanding super high winds. It's a great buffer. It really helps when hurricanes come because their roots are more in the ground than anything else. They also provide a habitat for many species, not just like crabs and insects, but also our bats and our snakes and our birds. Alright, and if you are curious to learn more about mangroves, there is a link for you. Other than that, that is what I require you to know about the 4 species of mangroves. Okay, so that's it. Those are the different species of mangroves that you can find in Florida. There's only one more section of notes, so be ready next week to take a Socrative with me. I'm also going to try and do a Kahoot with you. Looks like most of you voted to do it during your class time, but I can try and do it, one more time in the evening if that works best for some of you or you just can't do it at all. That's it. Make sure you submit the notes to Schoology. They're handwritten. You either took pictures of your handwritten notes or you handwrote them on Notability. All right? I know you just can't wait to find out what part 4 is. The suspense is killing you. It's all about why mangroves are important, how we're hurting them, and how we're helping them. Okay, have a wonderful weekend. See you next week.